All right. Welcome everyone to our class this morning. As you know, we're starting to wind down our lessons. We got this one, we've got one next week, and we've been talking about Exodus, and we're coming really close to the end of it. And my topic, and when we were divvying up topics, I actually jumped on this one. And the other guys looked at me like, what's wrong with you? We're going to talk about the tabernacle, the building of the tabernacle. And I'll admit there's a little selfish aspect of it because I'm into woodworking now, so I love to work with wood when I can. And the idea of what they used to build the tabernacle, it fascinated me. And not for this study, but for a study in times past, I started researching acacia wood, which was the wood that they built all the implements, which we'll talk about today. They built all the furniture and the fixtures in or most of them, in the tabernacle. And so I started researching acacia wood, and come to find out, you can still get acacia wood today. And in fact, I brought a butcher block of acacia wood that I happened to pick up in Southeastern Salvage in Mobile, Alabama. Now, you can't go down to your Home Depot or Lowe's and buy wood like this, but occasionally you can find it. And if you'd like to come and look at it later, you're welcome to. It's, Brother Wayne will attest, it's heavy and it's substantial. So I can imagine that the building of the different aspects of the tabernacle, those poles of acacia wood had to be quite sturdy because they were picking up some heavy items that they were building. But today's lesson is going to, I think at the beginning part, it's going to feel kind of rather academic. We're going to go through the building of the tabernacle, which I believe that is an important part of our Christian heritage, of our story. The aspect that the people that went before us, they were commanded by God to build this tabernacle so that he could dwell with his people on the earth. And one initial takeaway from the lesson of God and the tabernacle, the building of it, I think is that God deals in specifics. You'll note that if you've read it before, I'm sure, and when we go through it now, God does not deal in generalities. He did not say, build me a tabernacle, go. He was very, very, very specific. So the question comes to me that if God was so specific, he had a specific instruction because he wanted a specific outcome. So it just puzzles me today that in the religious world that we've taken the specifics that God has put in his word and we've generalized them. We've kind of pulled back on some of those things. And it's interesting to me that, I'll just be honest with you, I don't find a sinner's prayer in the Bible. I think God was very specific about that because if you think about it, all prayers are made by sinners because that's what we are. But none of them will change us from being lost to being saved. So let's just keep in mind that the specifics that God had, they're important. They were important to his people back then. They're just as important for us today. Another takeaway for me looking at it is, why so much gold and silver and bronze and acacia wood and all these different, and purple and red and all these blue and all these fine linens and twine and all these different things? Why such finery for something? God doesn't need these things. He doesn't need a house made of gold to worship him. But why was that? Now, it's not specifically written in the scriptures, but I can only imagine that the reason that these things were is so that people would appreciate how important God is for their own life, for those that were within the circle of the Israelites, and even those outside of that circle would look at it and say, their God must be mighty important for them to put so much effort and so many wonderful things, large panels of gold-plated framing, and all these different things, and the candlesticks, and all these, or the candle, the candle. some of these things, when God gives us things, that they are for our benefit and for his glory, just as the tabernacle was. So today we're going to zoom in and look at the tabernacle itself, and we'll break it down. But first, we need to talk about the cubit, the old cubit, our old friend, the cubit. No, I don't want you to raise your hand, Chip. This is not one of those things. Oh, he was testing his cubit. The cubit in those days was basically the measurement, a common measurement between the elbow and the tip of the middle finger. Now, the most common understanding is 18 inches is the most common variation of that. There's also a version of 16 inches. I went with the more common 18 inches. In fact, I measured the top of the Lord's Supper table here, which is larger than the Ark of the Covenant. This is 3 1/4 cubits. Now, Ted, he's got some European arm or something, because he only measured 3 cubits, but he's got a much longer cubit than my cubit. So we're going to assume that we're using the 18-inch cubit today as we go through. And what I did to help us kind of understand this is I converted those to feet and inches, because just like the metric system, we don't use it. We don't use metric, we don't use cubits, we use feet, we use inches. America. So we're going to convert that, but it's just so interesting as we look at some of the aspects. Let's start, of course, with the Ark of the Covenant. Exodus 25:10 through 16. It measures 3 feet 75 inches long by 2 feet 75 inches wide by 2 feet 0.75 inches, 2 3/4 inches tall. The materials used were acacia wood, just like this here, acacia wood and pure gold. Now, a woodworking term that I threw in here was the word carcass. That's what you use to describe the box or the structure that you're building. So the carcass was made of wood overlaid with gold inside and out, which is interesting because no one would see the inside of this box, of this structure. They would only be seeing the outside for the most part. So you had this structure of gold inside and out, and it would contain precious items. At this point in the story, it was only to contain the covenant, the commandments that God had given Moses, but it would hold other things later in the story of the Israelites. So it held precious items. That was its purpose. On top of the Ark of the Covenant was the mercy seat. The mercy seat measured 2.75 feet by 18 inches, and it sat on top of the Ark of the Covenant, or the Ark itself. It was to be made of one hammered piece of gold with 2 cherubim facing each other with their wings spread out, and this would be the place where God's presence would be in the Holy of Holies, in the most holy place in the tabernacle. So at this point, we have a place where God would meet on this earth. Then we have the table for bread of presence in Exodus 25:23 through 30. It measured 3 feet by 18 inches by 18 inches. So it was to be made of acacia wood and pure gold. Like many of the other structures, it would be framed with wood, then wrapped in pure gold with a hand width of a rim, the hand width wide, with a molding of gold around it, and 4 rings to carry it. We also had, I didn't want to overlook the fact that the poles that were to carry the ark and remain in the ark after they were made of acacia wood wrapped in gold, and you'll find that a lot. The most interesting are the frames that surround the tabernacle itself were made of gold, the gold panels, which we'll come to in a bit, but the braces in the middle of them, which I would call dowels in woodworking terms, but the brace that went through the middle of it was made of acacia wood and wrapped in gold. Now, this would never be seen until it's time to disassemble it and move it on. But still, God felt it was important for them to make this dowel, the center brace, out of wood and then wrap it in gold. But this bread of presence table would have the gold plates and the dishes and the flagons, which is the pitcher for the drink offering, and the bowls, and all of that made of pure gold. Now this is getting to be quite an expensive situation right here, but you recall when we talked about the contribution last week that the people gave and gave and gave to the point that Moses had to tell them to stop giving. So they had everything they needed and more to build this tabernacle. So the purpose was to hold the incense and the drink offering and the bread. Speaking of bread, I wanted to be inspired yesterday, and I was trying to finish up my lesson, work on. So I asked my wife one of 1,000 different odd questions. I said, honey, could you make me an unleavened cake? So she made me some unleavened cake, and it was quite delicious and flavorless. But it was, it got me inspired about all of these things that we were talking about. You can't have my unleavened cake, though. You can touch the wood, but leave my cake alone. So the table itself was to hold all these different things, and of course the acacia wood poles wrapped in gold would suffice to carry it. Then the golden lampstand. This is what I was trying to get out of my mouth earlier. The golden lampstand, it's a more interesting character to me because the size is not specified, but what was used was specified to make it. It was to be made of one piece, 1 talent of gold. Now, a talent in the research I did was anywhere between 70 pounds and 110 pounds. Now, this is going to be some heavy object, and it's going to have some size to it. So every aspect of this lampstand that was to give light in the area, in the holy place of the tabernacle, was to be made of one piece of hammered gold. From the stem, the cups, the calyxes, that is kind of a leaf-looking protection of a flower is what it's termed as, to the flowers, the 6 branches, the 4 almond blossoms that adorn the stem, the main stem of the lampstand, and the tongs and the trays, and everything that would work with it was made of pure gold from one piece, 1 talent of gold. And its purpose, of course, was to light the area of the temple. Now, the tabernacle curtain, from Exodus 1 through 6, it was to measure 42 feet by 30 feet times 2, and then it was joined with rings in the middle to make one big covering. So it was to be stitched with fine linen, pure gold and silver, goat's hair, ram skins, and goat skin, which we'll talk about in the rest of the coverings. But the design was to be 5 cherubim curtains times 2. They were stitched together, and then the other set were brought together to cover the tabernacle itself and to cover the mercy seat, the bread table, and the lampstand. So the tabernacle covering was made of goat's hair, tanned ram skin, goat skin, all of these things, several coverings. Isn't that interesting that they didn't just pitch a roof and put it on there? They had all these different coverings to protect it from the elements, and also to securely house what was inside of it. So they had these different coverings, 11 goat hair curtains, 45 by 6 feet joined, also tanned ram skin and goat skin, in order to cover it one after the other. I can imagine. Now, let's think about this just in today's cushy first world problem terms. How hot do you think it was in there? There's a fire going in the lampstand. The high priest is in there. We'll talk about what he's wearing, which is it's no like track running suit, no light little, nothing like that. So, and he is in there, the high priest is in there, and so there's incense burning and all of that. You're in the desert. Think about how hot that is. Now that had to be an experience right there, just to do that. But he did it. Aaron did it. So next we come to the tabernacle frame, which I also found interesting. And I'm doing these chronologically as they were given to Moses, as God gave instruction to Moses. But I was thinking about this, and when I get plans for doing some woodworking project, there's an order in which you do things, and the order was that you you start at the bottom, basically work your way up, whatever that is. So we've got all of these coverings either being made or made in this order as God has given it, and now we're going to go back to the frame that encloses, the actual structure that encloses all of these wonderful items that God has given the instruction for the Israelites to build. So this tabernacle frame is 45 feet by 6 feet and times 20. So there's 20 of these. These are the frames that will join together, and there will be the center brace and some back braces that go on it that will keep it together. And that center brace, again, that no one will see, is still wood, acacia wood, wrapped in gold. And so this was to enclose. So I can imagine that was some sight. If you could see that image, this gold wall down these both sides of these of this structure was pretty awe-inspiring. So there were 48 wood frames covered in gold with 80 silver bases. So there were 2 bases per frame to keep it erect. And the acacia wood covered in gold, 15 of those braces. And the purpose was, of course, to frame the tabernacle itself. Next, we go to the tabernacle veil. This veil had a very specific purpose, as everything in the tabernacle, but it was to separate the holy place from the most holy place. And as we know, which we'll look at in just a second, in the most holy place was the ark and the mercy seat. And then the veil, and then on the outside of it were the bread table, the lampstand, and the incense, which we'll talk about shortly. But so we had this very specific, the size was not specified, but it would be made of blue, purple, and scarlet fabric, and gold and silver and acacia wood. So they'd use these 4 columns made of acacia wood wrapped in gold with silver supports to hang this special, very special curtain that would separate the holy place from the most holy place. And it would have the cherubim hung, an image of the cherubim hung on the wall, on the curtain itself. So next, the placement. God even was so specific that he said, here's where I want you to place these items. Now, you would have thought that they would have just, you get them inside and we're good. Well, that wasn't good enough for God. He wanted them to be in a specific place. So he wanted the wall to, a veil to divide it. And on the north wall, which the tabernacle itself would be facing east, this way. That's north. So it would be facing this way. And on this wall, we would have the bread table. On this wall, we would have the lampstand. And in the middle, in front of the curtain, we would have the incense, the table of incense. And also, on this side, we would have the ark and the mercy seat. So God was even specific about how we would put those together. So next we have the tabernacle screen, or basically the front door of the tabernacle. So it was not specified in its size, although we could deduce that from some other measurements. It was blue, purple, scarlet yarn, and a fine linen, acacia wood, and gold and bronze. This is a little different in the building of this. Still acacia wood columns, 5 of them, acacia wood columns wrapped in gold, but they used bronze in the base of them. Instead of, to this point, they've used silver to base the different structures, but here they're using bronze. Now, I'm a graphic designer by trade, so the idea of making things connect and visually connect is a part of what I do for my job. So I thought, wow, that was a great use of bronze. I'm sure it's better weatherproof than silver. I mean, you wouldn't want to have that out in the air. But the fact that the other elements that are used in the court, which we'll talk about in a minute, are made of bronze, that was a wonderful segue visually from an interior design standpoint. It's a segue from the outside to the inside. It used the bronze footings or braces for the columns instead of the silver. So it did that. It had that little connection there. So I thought that was very interesting. So the screen was to separate the outer court with the holy place. The bronze altar And you see this image of the altar. If you can see it, I'm sure it was much worse than this. See those little spatters of blood on the corner? I imagine, they had to use blood as a part of the offerings and throw it on the altar all the time. I bet it was a mess because that thing got hot and there was blood being thrown all over it, for the different sacrifices and different things. So, but this altar was 7.5 feet by 7.5 feet by 4.5 feet tall, made of acacia wood and wrapped in bronze. Now, we were talking a little bit before class, and I noted that if you'll come and pick this wood up, you'll note how heavy it is. That was a big structure. So God said, make it out of boards, which meant the inside was going to be hollow. So it was actually just a frame of the acacia wood, then wrapped in the bronze, which is very, very intuitive because that thing is going to be heavy anyway. And if it was made from solid acacia wood, then wrapped in bronze, it would be the worst chore to be picked as one of the Levites. Now you carry not the altar, please not the altar. Give me the showbread table, or something like that. It would have had to have been a real task to carry this. So because there's certainly the wood, the poles of acacia wood that were they were wrapped in bronze, and then it had to be carried every time that the Lord moved, basically. So this was where they performed. And there was a grate, there was a catcher, there were trays, there were all the implements that were all made of bronze so that it could be very consistent. So the court itself, as we enter the court, we have fine twined linen, bronze, silver. The linen was hung on the bronze pillars with silver bases. They used silver on this, and so they kept this silver/bronze theme going. And they had bases, utensils, pegs made of bronze, and it was to surround. So it was important for God to enclose this area. You would have thought that he might not have had the walls around it, the outer court, because he would want everyone to see what the high priest was doing, what the tribe of Levi was doing in the court. But still, he wanted it to be enclosed, to be somewhat of a mystery, something that people would, if you're interested enough, then you'd have to explore that within reason, of course. But so we had this court that was set up every time that the tabernacle needed to be erected. And breaking it down, I was trying to get a glimpse. I did not find, and maybe one of you know, or some of you know, that the actual time it might have taken to dismantle and reassemble the tabernacle, the whole structure. But from an estimation based on the amount of time worked and the person of the day and all this, that it probably took about 8,000 people to break down the tabernacle. No small task. And I'm sure it was not an overnight adventure, but event. But it was something that was vital to being the central point, the central focus of the Jewish community at that time. So we've got our court built. Now let's turn to the high priest garments. In Exodus 28, the materials of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet yarns and linen, onyx stones, sardis stones, topaz stones, carbuncle stones, emerald, sapphire, diamond, jacinth, agate, amethyst, beryl, onyx, and jasper. A bunch of stones were used. These were precious stones. Again, we don't read about any of this leaving Egypt, but I'm sure some of that came from there, but I'm sure, some must have come from the trading. But if you think about how the breastpiece with the onyx stones on the shoulder, the ephod, the plate on the beginning that hung over the neck, over the shoulders of the high priest, would have the 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. The Urim and Thummim, those are tough words to say, but they had those placed. He had them placed close to his heart to represent the people and their sins. But the gold plate on the forehead, the turban, the robe, all of these things, there had to be some weight to that, and the sash. There had to be some weight affiliated with that. And it said when Aaron first put it on, he wore it from night to morning. And that's when they did it. So he wore it for a long time, basically. So it was something for, and it had bells on it. And it said, the Exodus tells us that it had bells on it so that the high priest would not die. I'm not sure what that meant, but someone speculated that if you stop hearing the bells, there would be trouble in the holy place. You needed to keep hearing those bells rattling around in the holy place, and that may have something to do with that. But so they built this, and they built all of this, or this is what God told Moses to build in Exodus 28. So then we go back to the altar of incense, which when I was running through this originally, I was looking at it and saying, where's the incense? I know there's a picture of incense, and I keep seeing it, and I feel like chronologically, we moved out of the tabernacle and on to the robe. Now we're going to go back into the tabernacle, and probably because of some importance to it, the altar of incense found in Exodus 31 through 10, which measured 18 inches by 18 inches by 3 feet, made of acacia wood and wrapped in gold. It would be covered in gold. It would have horns. It would have molding around the side and rings to carry, poles of acacia wood wrapped in gold. And its purpose was to keep incense going. And then that got me to thinking, why incense? And God said, so that it needed to be the right mixture, which God even goes into the mixture of what it would take to make the right incense to burn in his presence so that it would be a sweet savor to him, so that he would be glorified in the process. And we all know that there are cases that, burning strange fire and doing these different things, that it can have a detrimental effect to you if you don't do what God asks you to do in the manner he asks you to do it. So moving back out of the tabernacle, we go to the bronze basin. The size is not specified, but the materials are bronze and water, of course. It was made of bronze, and it was for the purpose of Aaron and his sons to wash their hands and feet before working. So they not only were washing their hands, but they had to wash their feet, which I found interesting because that reminds me certainly of the moment that Moses came in the presence of God at the burning bush. He said, take off your sandals because the ground you trod is holy ground. So even their feet had to be sanctified, had to be cleansed for the work that they were doing on a daily basis at the tabernacle. Very interesting. So now we have all the materials. Now we got to construct it. And this has always been kind of not humorous, but lighthearted to me that in the Bible, the story is set up and the instructions are given. And there's a lot of detail in the instructions. Then in Exodus, the construction was 36 through 39. So what it basically said was Bezalel and Oholiab, Oholiab, the two men that were gifted with this ability to put these things together, to put all these together or manage the process, they were given this gift to do it, and then they had to build it. They and everyone who volunteered, they began to build, and it took them a while to build these things, months probably. But they followed the instructions, and it goes through the same detail as when God gave the instruction to Moses. The same detail is used in the construction and in Exodus 36 through 39. So it's constructed. Now the tabernacle is assembled. The biggest note that we can make about the time that Moses first erected the tabernacle was that he did it 1 year to the day of Passover. So it was the 1 year anniversary of Passover that Moses erected the tabernacle. And I find that a wonderful symbolism that the time that God freed his people from slavery, now he wanted to be with them, and he wanted a place that he could come and be there with his people. So that's a lot of details and information and geeked out stuff that you may or may not have been interested in. But now I'd like to talk about some applications. Let's bring it kind of a little closer to home. So what can we learn from the different aspects of the tabernacle? We know that we do not have a tabernacle today. There is no one place that we go to be in the presence of God, and I'm thankful for it. But as we look deeper into these items, I believe that there are applications, there are aspects of these that we can look at today that means that we carry the tabernacle with us wherever we go. Let's look at the first one would be the Ark of the Covenant. The purpose, as we said earlier, was to hold things of importance. One of my favorite passages about what we'll call the heart, and this is the application, that you have the Ark of the Covenant, which represents, that holds things of importance. For us today, that could be our heart. And one of my most favorite passages from the Bible in the New Testament was the story about Mary, the mother of Jesus. In Luke 2:19, after the shepherds had seen baby Jesus and they were so excited they had to go tell others about him, the passage reads in verse 19, "But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart." I can just imagine the pride she was feeling, that my son is so important to these people that they're willing to go and tell others. So she pondered those things in her heart. And she would never understand how important Jesus was. But if you've ever been complimented about your children, you ponder those things. You keep those in your heart. And it reminds me of like a Facebook memory. You know, you open Facebook and you say, look, 6 years ago you ate a donut at this place and you really took a picture of it and you were excited about it. Well, that's fine. But the wonderful memories that we have, especially of our children, of our spouse, of things that we might have done that come back up as a memory, those are things that we should hold in our heart. Those that have gone on before us. I know I keep a lot of precious memories of my parents in my heart, and every time something happens that allows me to come back up, this hat that was used in our display for homecoming, that was my dad's hat. At one time, we had a logo at Dalraida that our catchphrase was, our slogan was, "The heart of your family" at Dalraida. And this was one of my dad's favorite hats that he loved to wear. And so every time I see this and see some aspect that reminds me of him, that's what I stored away in my heart. That's what I love to pull back up. So a verse that we can use as reference for the heart would be Proverbs 4:23. "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life." Guard your heart. That's what it's saying. Don't let things into your heart that are going to affect you negatively, because they not only affect you, they affect others around you. So guard your heart. Next would be the mercy seat. The mercy seat, it specifically was where God talked to Moses, but so often in the book of Exodus, it said that God and Moses spoke together as friends. They had conversations. So I termed this mercy seat as a place where Moses spoke to God, where also the high priest spoke to God, but where people spoke to God as God was speaking to them. And so what is that avenue that we have that we can speak to God? Of course, that's prayer. And in 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18, it says, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." If our spiritual life was a sandwich, and I know you didn't think I was going to go in that direction, but if our spiritual life was a sandwich, prayer would be the peanut butter, and the Bible would be the jelly. It's just not the same without one of them. Don't tell my wife that, because she loves a straight peanut butter sandwich, but I can't do that. But you have to have the combination. You need to have the combination to have the perfect mix. So just like peanut butter, prayer should stick with you. You know what I mean? Do you see what I did there with the peanut butter? So it should stick with you long after it leaves your mouth. And so don't forget to pray on a daily basis. Next, we look at the bread table. The bread table was symbolic of sustenance. I knew I'd get it eventually. Thank you for not just walking out. Said he can't even use the English language. What are we doing here? So sustenance, which were substantive, by the way, but it was symbolic. It wasn't that God needed this bread and needed these different things. He didn't need these things, but it was symbolic. You know, they had 12 loaves of the bread, the unleavened bread, to represent the 12 tribes on the table. Very interesting. So what is something that's symbolic of sustenance for us today? I would say it's the Holy Spirit. In John 6:63, it says, "It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you are spirit. They are life." So the lesson today, I'll be honest with you, part of it was brought to you by the Holy Spirit. Because as I was going through and looking for these things would pop into my head. I believe that is the work of the Holy Spirit. He is to bring to remembrance the things that God has told us. And we should lean into that. We should embrace that aspect of our Christianity, that the Holy Spirit does work in our lives. John 14:26 says, "But the Helper, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things and bring to your remembrance all things that I said to you." So don't overlook or underestimate the power that the Holy Spirit has in our lives to help us in our Christian walk on a daily basis. Next, we look at the lampstand. The lampstand was to give light where there is darkness. In my life anyway, the thing that gives me light in my everyday life is the hope that God gives us. He gives us that hope, that light that we need when sometimes our whole world is getting dark and we don't know where to turn. Romans 12:12 says, "Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer." Rejoicing in hope does not mean to rejoice when you get the victories. It doesn't mean that when times are great, hey, it's time to rejoice in hope. Oh no, hope is there when you're at the bottom, when you're at the worst place in your life, when you look up and you say, there's nothing left for me here. Oh, there's hope. And it's right there with you, right there with you. God's hope is there with you all the way. You've got to rejoice in that hope, regardless of where you are in your life and what's going on. So rejoice when you're having your worst day ever. When you are driving to work tomorrow morning or driving to wherever, and these crazy people around here drive like they normally do, crazy, rejoice in hope. Don't run into them. But make sure that you keep that hope with you. The incense was there to provide comfort. What provides comfort in a Christian life today? I would say that encouragement does. It provides comfort like you've never seen. Hebrews 3:13 says, "But encourage one another daily as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness." Psychologist John Gottman, he did an exploration or a study on positive versus negative ratios of marriage using a 5-to-1 ratio. And he called it the magic ratio. And this means that for every one negative feeling or interaction between partners, there needed to be 5 positive feelings or interactions to countermand that. Gottman and his colleagues predicted whether 700 newlywed couples would stay together or divorce by scoring their positive and negative interactions in a 15-minute conversation between each husband and wife. 10 years later, the follow-up revealed that they had predicted divorce with 94% accuracy. So, go ahead and have your spat, but follow it up with a lot of positive reinforcement. That's a part of life. We're going to disagree on things. In fact, I've told this before in this auditorium. When I was first married, I thought my marriage was going to end almost immediately because my wife and I got into an argument. That didn't happen at my house. My parents never argued when I was at home, ever. Or so I thought. So we went, and Karen said, that's not right. So we went to him, and Karen said, did y'all ever argue? And he goes, Dad said, all the time in the bedroom. And so I said, it blew me away. I said, what? My whole life, I thought people who are married never, ever, ever argued. Not necessarily the case. So we made sure we argued in front of the kids, and then we made up, we made nice and everything at the end of it, so that they saw that it's not all, bubble gum and roses. There's some rough spots in there too. So we've had 3 arguments in our 34 years of marriage. We'll erase that tape later. So be positive. Encourage the ones that are around you. It is important. The tent of meeting itself, a place to worship. That would be our church, our congregation. Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as in the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and do so much the more as you see the day approaching. So regardless of how you're feeling at times, don't you agree that when you leave the gathering, when you leave the brethren, you just feel better? It just makes you feel better. So it's not always easy to get here because stresses of life and all these things, but when you leave, you definitely feel better. So we should be grateful of this opportunity we have, and we do know that some are not able to work. They're worshiping with us at home. We love you, and your presence is felt here even though you're not here, and we love you and miss you. And we would love for you to be here, but that is not always the case. So we need to always continue reaching out to the folks who are not able to be with us. The altar is a place to sacrifice. That place for us would be the Lord's Supper, the ultimate sacrifice that was made. Luke 22, 19 and 20 says, and he took the bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given to you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. So last week, remember I challenged you and me to really put your heart and your mind in the special place for the Lord's Supper. We have another opportunity today. When we have the Lord's Supper, make sure you're focused on that. Your whole mind and your whole heart are involved in the Lord's Supper today, because that's the sacrifice that is most important for us. The basin. The basin was used for cleansing. Of course, what's the thing that cleanses us today? And that's baptism. Romans 6:4, therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death, just just as Jesus was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in the newness of life. While I'm not happy with what Adam and Eve did to us back when they ate from that tree, I'm profoundly grateful that God, in his infinite wisdom and mercy, set in motion a plan so that we could rejoin him. When you look at the Old Testament, you see all these different stories. It's all one story. It's one story. How could we get from a completely lost world and existence to a saved one? And that was through Jesus. So the entire Old Testament, in my estimation, is the story of how we got to Jesus, because that's the most important story that we need to know. Very quickly, the court, a place to find what is most important. That would be the Bible. Romans 10:17, so faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. The Gutenberg Bible, that was the first pressed Bible in February 23rd, 1455, was in Germany, was the first book created in print with movable type. And then it multiplied after that. I'm so grateful that we have the Bible, that we are not running around with a bunch of scrolls trying to pick up what's in the Bible. According to one source, there are currently over 3,030 versions of the Bible in over 2,000 languages available in print and digitally. And still, the Guinness Book of World Records still has the Christian Bible as the best-selling book in the world. As of 2021, it has sold over 5 billion copies. and counting. So it's wonderful that we are able to use that and have that available. So a final thought, that we have the tabernacle with us. We carry it with us every day. We don't have to have 8,000 people put this thing together. There are aspects that we've learned from the tabernacle that were given to us through the New Testament that we have, that we get to carry, that we need to carry. We need to keep those. Let us make that impression on others. Let us be the representation, just as the tabernacle was the representation of where God is, of where God would be. That's what we are. We are the representation of where God is. He's with us, and let's make sure we share him with others. Thank you so much for your time today and for hanging with us through the study. Our final class will be led by Scott Lockwood next week, and I'm sure he will do the same laid-back, soft-spoken, non-intensive job that he normally does, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you.